Living my bucolic life, free, healthy city strife. Horses, chicks, and dogs, they are my neighbors. I cook and sew and spin, and move the horses into the barn. Then time to move them out again. Red barns, green pastures, beautiful white houses. The view I see each day when I arise. This life pleases me, as it is plain to see. I'm living my bucolic life.
Hello everybody, welcome back. So we're having a blizzard outside. It is extremely windy, extremely cold, and much too serious. So I wanted to do a project that was a little more lighthearted and hopefully not difficult, but we'll see. It's going to be this apron. It says it is called a Tabard apron, which, you know, I'm not familiar with that word, but that's okay. There's 3 different styles, and view A is the one I'm going to be making. And it looks like it's kind of a wrap in the front where it wraps over and ties over here. And I think that would be easy to put on. I don't want something I'm going to have to pull over my head. And I like that this actually, it covers your whole body, the back too. And I do a lot of very messy things, especially in my shop. And I think that that would be good. It's almost like a little crafty, folky apron, you know, and I like that. And it looks like it's something that I could just throw over when I have like a t-shirt and jeans on, throw over that or whatever. So the fabric I'm going to use is actually one I've had for quite some time. This is left over from when I did a big Laura Ashley dress many years ago. And I think it's really fun, very busy, but you know, really fun with its crazy birds. But the pattern calls for 2.5 yards. I only have a little over 2 yards, so I'm just going to be making my apron slightly shorter, but then my legs are shorter than the typical measurements that they make their patterns for, so that should be fine. So this fabric is hopefully pre-washed. I believe I pre-washed it many years ago. If not, it's an apron, it'll be fine. So it looks like there's only a couple pieces. Let me go ahead and get it cut out and we'll put it together. So I'm getting my pattern laid out, and this pin is the center point on my fabric. And I'm only about 1/2 inch beyond that. So I'm just gonna shorten it by about 1 inch. And I'm just gonna measure up 1 inch from the bottom line on the pattern, draw a line and make that my cutting line. I am cutting out the size large just because I am large, and who wants a tight fitting apron, you know, that defeats the purpose of so many things. So the front piece is a whole lot wider than the back piece, and it goes the entire width of my 45-inch fabric. My fabric has this really big selvage. So, you know, I'm going to get selvage print on here, but that should be in the seam allowance, so I'm not really worried about it. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started. There are 2 ties. There's a right tie, which is longer, and a left tie, which is shorter. And we're going to do the same thing to both of these. And what they want you to do is take the very end of one of the sides of your tie, turn it under 1/4 inch and press it, okay? And then fold it right sides together, and leaving this pressed in open, start stitching about 1 inch or so away. And let's see, what seam allowance are we doing? They say 3/8 of an inch. Okay, so sewing this in one big long folded piece at 3/8 of an inch all the way down, and we need to do that to both of the ties. I was over here pressing these, and I decided instead of stitching it at 3/8, I'm going to serge this whole strip, you know, still stopping at about this point, just shooting off the edge. But we're going to be flipping these right side out, and I think that that's going to make it a lot easier to turn. There'll be less bulk in there. So just letting you know, I'm probably going to trim off about 1/8 of an inch of fabric and just serge it up all the way. And in case you didn't know, I just have a plain 1980s vintage serger. Works great, you know. It's not broke, why fix it? And I am also going to be using Rosie again today, just trying to get used to her. She's the new girl in my collection. Okay, so we're going to flip these things right side out. I'm just using my little wire latch hook kind of turner, sticking it in this open side. Come all the way through, and then on the folded edge, I'm going to stick the bottom of my little turner up about 3/8 of an inch down. Okay, you want to get enough fabric in there, it's not going to come loose. And just start pulling her. Come on. There you go. Okay, once that little nose is coming through, then I can just grab that and pull the rest of the way. Then what they're going to want you to do is this edge down here that we left open and it was turned in, I'm going to get that folded up so that it matches like so. Okay. And they say with a needle and thread, slip stitch this little edge together so it looks nice and neat. You know, which is fine. I will go ahead and do that with a matching thread and be right back. Okay, so time to strategize here. The dress or apron, you know, it could be a dress, I guess, is going to have bias tape binding down the neckline and the front, and also around the armholes. So really, since the bottom is going to be hemmed, the only part that I really need to protect from fraying is going to be this outside edge. Just those two right there. So instead of serging all the way around the pieces, next time I'm over at the sewing machine, I'm just going to serge the side seam and the little top shoulder parts, just because I don't want things fraying when I wash it. But what we need to do right now is go ahead and attach the ties, and I did go ahead and iron them flat, you know, just to make everything pretty. So over here at the very front edge, there's two little dots right there. That's what the tie is going to be centered at. And the top dot is 3/8 of an inch down, since this is going to have bias tape on it. It's very small seam allowances here. So that's right where this corner is. I don't really need to mark that. It's, you know, just a 1/4 inch down here. I'll stick a pin there just anyway, and go ahead and pull all of this off. There's a couple other marks that I'm going to need to put on over here on the side. It looks like there's a couple, and there's little dots here for pocket placement, but because my fabric is so busy and I'm afraid that those marks would just get lost at this point, I'm just going to keep my little tissue paper handy, and when it comes time to use those, I'll just overlay it over my fabric and find those positions then. That's the easiest that I can think of. So now I have two sides here, all right? If I was wearing it, this would be my right side, and no, this would be my left side, and this would be my right side. So, because you know it's opposite when you put it on you. But honestly, it doesn't really matter. It's just whether one wraps on top of the other or not, you know? You do you, as far as I'm concerned. So the tie that is longer is supposed to be for the right side, okay? So I'm going to take my longer one and pin it over here with the cut edge right about there, okay? And with the shorter tie, okay, this is the end that's pretty and slip stitch, the cut edge one, I'm going to put over here. And those are going to get basted on. So when I'm over at my machine basting this, I'm going to go ahead and serge up at the top here and this side of my side seam area over here, just so that it won't fray later. Okay, so with that done, you know, this part just basted on. I'm going to trim off that little edge actually. And serging where it needs to be. And when I serge the edges, I don't really trim fabric off. I just run it on the edge so that it won't fray. So I need to get my back piece out. Oh, I wanted to mention, it calls for purchased 1/2 inch single fold bias tape. And it says for my size large that I need 2 packs. Well, I don't have 2 packs that match. And this is such a colorful piece, I don't think that that's going to matter. So I'm just going to be using a couple different packs just to use them up, you know, using them on different parts. And if I still need more, I can use pink because that's fun. So let me go ahead and get my back piece out. So on the back piece, before we get to sewing it to the front, I am going to also serge up this side seam and the shoulder seam. So let me go ahead and get that done. Okay, so now that that is done, we're going to connect these two. Now on the side that they're calling the left side, which is this one here, this is my front piece on top, the back piece underneath. On the pattern, there's 2 dots right here. And only on this side, I need to leave it open between those 2 dots. That's where the tie is going to pass through. So you know what, I'm going to get my heat erasable pen because I can see it on this wrong side, and I only need those dots for while I'm stitching right now. So I'm going to sew at 5/8 inch, I'm assuming, because they don't tell us otherwise, all the way down here, but leaving this part open on this side. On the other side, there's no opening, it's just straight down. And then also up here at the top, going to match these up and sew across here at 5/8 inch. And when I'm done, I'm going to press all my seam allowances open. Okay, so that is all done. Now on the side where we left the opening over here, what they want you to do is come back and put a row of stitching about 1/4 inch from it all the way around like this. And that's just going to hold those seam allowances out nice and flat. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, just straight stitches. So I have actually 2 different colors of thread, dark and a pink. So you can probably see the pink a little bit better there, just going around that hole. So I'm going to stick this aside for a minute and grab my pocket piece out. And me, just being me, I am going to go ahead and serge around this. Okay, on the pattern piece, there is a fold line, and it is 1 1/4 inch down. All right, so I am just on my wrong side of my pocket, up here at the top. I'm going to put my ruler there, and there we go. Draw that line straight across here. Now I need to go to my ironing board, fold this edge, the top edge, under about 1/4 inch, and then fold it down at that fold line like this and get it pressed nicely. Okay, so there it is. Once that was done, you need to sew it at 5/8 inch from here down, over, and back up, all right? And you know that seam allowance because that is the distance from this circle to the cut edge. So now I need to flip this right side out. I'm just going to trim some of the bulk out of these corners, you know, like so. Flip it right side out, and then that stitching line I just put in is going to be the guide for my fold line all the way down and at the bottom. So let me go ahead and get this pressed. Okay, so it's all pressed. At the bottom I just pressed it straight up. It is just an apron, so I'm not going to do funky mitering and everything, but I can trim off this folded edge just so that that's not going to poke out. So now I need to get my pattern piece back out with my front piece because there's a couple marks on here. Oops, that's the wrong piece. Okay, right here, these dots here, that's what's marking the pocket placement. Okay, so and there's only one dot. The other dot is at the seam line. So, you know, punching out the circle of my tissue paper. Just going to lay this up here and figure out if I overlay it so that I have my seam allowance over here. Okay, so I'm just laying it so that my edge is about 5/8 inch in. That's going to give me the position here for this dot, right to there. Now the other dot for the other side is on the back piece, which is kind of funky. The pocket kind of straddles this side seam. And I can see that it's basically, the dot for my size is 5/8 of an inch in from the cut edge. So that means it is right on the seam line, okay? So I'm not going to be worried about that. I'm just going to go ahead and get this placed. So I have a little pin. I know you probably can't see. There's a little pin head right here. That's marking the dot on my front. So I'm going to go ahead and tack that on there and bring this side over to the seam line. Now it looks like on their photos it's slightly tilted. I'm just going to put it straight. No, I'm going to put it slightly tilted. We're going to be a bit jaunty here. Okay, so what I'm going to need to do, I know it's very hard to see because it's a very busy print, is edge stitch it, reinforcing up at the top corners, edge stitching it down, over, and back up. Okay, everybody, welcome back. It's actually been a couple more days, and I really need to get cracking on this because I'm behind schedule. So I'm going to start out by putting my bias tape around my armhole, and I'm pretty much going to follow the instructions in the pattern. You use 1/2 inch single fold bias tape. So what that means is the finished width, when you pull it out of the package, is a 1/2 inch, and each side is just folded in once. If it's double folds, that means it's folded twice, okay? But what I wanted to show you is when you get it, go ahead and fold it in half and take a look at it, because one side is going to be slightly wider than the other side, okay? You want the wider side to be on the outside of your garment, the shorter one to be on the inside. Again, my camera's doing weird light things, so we're just going to let it for a while. So I need to open this up, and actually I need to start it on this side. Well, let's see. If I start it at the bottom of my armhole over here, okay, putting it into my sewing machine, I'm going to be sewing this direction. So I want to make sure that my wider side is over here, starting it on this side. So I'm going this way, all right? And I'm going to open it up like this, all right? And actually, I'm going to open it all the way, fold the raw edge in about 1/4 inch or so. I think that's closer to 3/8, but who's guessing? And then fold that bottom edge back up. So it looks like this, all right? I'm going to line up this folded edge with my underarm seam right here, and the raw edge of my bias tape with the raw edge of my fabric, okay? Now let me just put a little clip here. And then when I'm stitching it, I'm basically going to be stitching in this crease right here, all right? Now, what I have also found is that it's a lot easier for me, instead of trying to mold it as I'm sewing around a curve by pulling the tape over. It's easier for me to actually pull the garment over as I'm sewing and just keep the garment kind of going straight like that. But either way, whatever works for you, you do you. I'm just going to be folding right here along this crease all the way around, and when I'm done, I'm just going to overlap the tape probably about 1 inch or so and then cut it off. Okay, so I am over here on Rosie, and I wanted to give you a little bit of a close-up, if I can, on how I do my 1/2 inch bias tape, because it can be a little bit tricky because you're dealing with just like 1/8 of an inch seam allowance there. And I would say if you are having trouble getting the edges to line up exactly, it's actually, in my opinion, a little bit better if you have to go this way and give yourself more space than if you go this way and you cut yourself short, because then you're going to run into not being able to have your bias tape actually stay together, So let me just show you how I sew the first lap on right here. This is the very bottom. It's important to make sure that your seam allowances stay open both on the bottom and up here on the shoulder, and I haven't gotten there yet. But I started it out at the center seam in the bottom with that fold right here, okay? So right here I have it kind of a curve coming, and what I wanted to show you is I'm just opening it up, and instead of trying to pull my tape this way, I'm just going to move my fabric over that way. Okay, and just a little bit at a time, not too fast, because it's all about the precision of making sure these two edges stay even, or as close to even as you can, and then stitching straight down that little fold right there. Okay, okay, so this is what it is looking like right now. All right, up here, regular, and down here at the bottom, like this. Okay. To do the second round of stitching, I don't want to start down here where all the joins are. That's a little too thick for me. So I'm actually going to flip my garment over, and I'm using a thread that's, you know, matching to my bias tape because my stitches are going to show. I want to put the fold of my fabric here so it is right exactly where that stitching line is. I can barely see the stitching line just peeking out the edge here, okay? That's how I'm folding it. If you've been sewing along and you have a little extra out here, you might want to trim that because there's not a whole lot of space in here to get that fold in. So I don't fold it all ahead of time. I'm just gonna get my garment over here, fold it up, and get ready to sew. So let me get it started, folding it appropriately right here, and get it set under my machine. Now I am using the inside of this toe right here as my seam guide. So I'm placing that at the fold of my bias tape, which will put my needle just barely inside of it. So on the right side of the fabric, it will be stitched on top of the bias tape. So if, let me see, I already did the other side here. Here it is. Okay. So this is the side I've already done here. All right. So that's, you can see that's first stitching line. I've placed this just inside of it, and then I made my second row of stitching on top of it. But because I placed it where this is, I know that this row of stitching is going to be on top of the tape and not out here somewhere, okay? So that's how it is on the right side, you know? You're dealing with a very small amount. This is a 1/4 inch showing here, sometimes less than a 1/4 inch based on how it's folded, okay? So in case you have trouble getting your bias tape stuff to line up, that's just the way that I do it. You know, everyone has their own way. You do you, but this works for me. So I'm just going to show you a little bit. I'm just going to fold it so I can barely see the stitching and let her go and do it again. And I only work with maybe 2 inches at a time, because to me it's just not worth it to go whizzing through a huge amount and then have to pick it out, you know? So anyway, let me finish this up and I'll meet you back at the table. Okay, so the next thing we're going to tackle before we do the bias tape down the front is the hem. And in the instructions it's a little bit confusing because they're telling you to turn it up, press it, and then trim off half of what you've turned up. You know, I think that what they're wanting you to do is make a very narrow hem, okay? So what I'm going to do, because you want this to be thin enough, your hem to be thin enough so that out here at the edge when you put your bias tape on it, it's not going to be too bulky for that little bitty bias tape to wrap around, okay? So with that understanding, what I'm going to do is just serge this edge so it's not going to fray, turn it up about 5/8 of an inch, press it, and then once this is serged, just machine stitch straight across here to hem it up. Just simple as that. And that's going to give me a hem over here that's not bulky at all. Okay, so I just got back over here, glanced at the instructions, got to apologize because I did it the wrong way again. You know, this is a perfectly good way for using bias tape, you know, to cover an edge, but they wanted us to use it more like a flexible facing. So I'm going to do it their way around the front because I need to use bias tape all on this front edge. So I'm going to show you the more flexible facing kind of way of using it, and just know that what the instructions are telling you to do is to do the method I'm going to do here for your sleeves. But honestly, it's your project. You can do it whatever way you want to, you know. I don't have enough of this blue and of the dark blue. It's the wrong width. So I'm going to use pink. You know, this is a very colorful fabric. I might as well while I have it. So very similar to the way I did my very first strip of bias tape around my sleeves. First, I'm going to figure out which side is wider. Okay, and I can tell this side over here is wider, so that's the first side I'm going to sew on. So if this is the bottom edge of my apron dress, okay, there's my hem right there. Get you in a little closer. Okay, what I'm going to do is, again, open it up, fold it in over, you know, that's like a fat 1/4 inch about there, and place that at the very edge, okay, so that my fold of my dress and my fold of my tape are at the same spot. I'm just going to put a pin there. All right, so at that point, I'm going to do it the exact same way that I did before, just stitching, you know, putting this along the edge, so cut edge of fabric and cut edge of tape are level, and do a straight stitch up this fold here, okay? And again, this fold is the wider of the two folds. I'm going to do this all the way up around the neckline and back down to the other side. And when I get to the other side, just before I get to it, I'll clip my tape and fold it just like this. Okay, so I've got it stitched on the first round. What I need to do is understitch it, but before I do that, at this point here where this tie is, there's a curve, and there's a lot going on there, so I have just a little bit peeking out. I'm going to come in here and trim some of that, okay? We do that on the other side also, right here, okay? Lots of stuff going on right there. Now, they're going to have you understitch this, which is good, so if I should actually start on this side right here, I'm going to fold my tape flat this way, okay, so that this tiny little seam allowance is underneath my bias tape. And I'm going to put it on my machine this way, you know, with everything layered on this side, and do a row of straight stitching really close to the edge right along here, all the way around, going through all of these layers right there. Okay, so with that done, you can see my understitching there. What I'm going to do now is turn it and press it. So I'm turning it to the inside, and when I press it, I want just a touch of the fabric to be showing, okay? So if I place it like so, and just start pressing it up all the way, it's going to go really easily because this is a bias tape, which is cut on the bias, so it flexes. Even up here around the neck edge where there is a curve, you really shouldn't have any trouble turning it and pressing it. I know in the instructions it says to clip curves, but this is such a narrow bias tape, I really think I can just work around that curve like that, okay? So let me go ahead and get this whole thing pressed. Once it's all pressed, what I'm going to do, they want you to baste it, flip it to the right side, and top stitch it along your basting. I don't think that's necessary, so once I have it pressed, so I know it's going to be in the good place, you know, and it's going to look nice. I'm actually just going to look at the wrong side and come back and edge stitch right along this side. So there will be stitching showing on this side. So I'm probably going to switch out to a navy blue bobbin just so it doesn't show up too terribly much. But I am just going to edge stitch it on the machine looking at this side. Okay, so now that it is stitched on the outside here, you know, that's looking pretty good. On the inside, this is the row of stitching that I just put in. I pressed it before, but if you do this and it feels like it's not laying quite flat around the curve there or around the neck, go ahead and press it again. I think mine is okay. I might throw it on my ironing board, but you never know. I'm going to go ahead and put it on my dress form and let's see what she looks like. Okay, so here it is. I mean, it's an apron. It's kind of like a smock apron kind of thing, you know? Not much to it. Wraps around, ties. It's going to do what I need it to do. Again, my cat joining in. It did what it needed to do, you know? Sometimes you just need a little apron kind of project, and I like that it's easy to put on. You just wrap it around and tie it. It only has one pocket over here. It couldn't hurt to have two pockets. If I was to do it again, I'd probably put in two pockets, just one on the same side on the other, you know? Wouldn't hurt anything. So it's cold out here, still blizzardy, still winter, so I'm not gonna linger, but I hope you like this video, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
My bucolic life, healthy city strife. Horses, chicks, and dogs, they are my neighbors. I cook and some spin, and move the horses into the barn. Then time to move them out again. Red barns, green pastures, beautiful white houses. The view I see each day when I arise. This life pleases me, as it is plain to see. I'm living my bucolic life.